What a day. It's the first time we heard exactly how Erin Patterson is alleged to have murdered her lunch guests. The prosecution says she deliberately poisoned the beef Wellington meal she served her estranged husband's family. But the defence says something very different happened that day. They say the lunch was a tragedy and a terrible accident. I'm Brooke Greibert-Craig, and this is The Mushroom Cook. Wow, Laura, what a big day in court.
Oh my goodness. I'm almost relieved that we're sitting down to record this episode because I feel like we learnt so much today that I need to unpack it all with you.
My mind is literally exploding. I just can't believe it.
Yeah, so we're going to try our hardest today to break it all down for our listeners, but you might need to bear with us because there is a lot we have to get through.
So broadly, Laura, what happened today?
So today was the first time we heard the prosecution put their case against Erin. They did that in their opening address. And I'm just going to repeat myself again, but it's important we get this out of the way. Erin has been charged with 3 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder, and she has pleaded not guilty. So the prosecution today put forward their case, and that contained a lot of allegations, which is what we will be unpacking today.
Okay, let's start with the lunch. What do the prosecution say happened?
The lunch, we know it happened at Leongatha at Erin's home on July 29, 2023. 5 people were invited to this lunch. Simon Patterson, her former husband, Simon's parents, Don and Gail Patterson, and Simon's aunt and uncle, Ian and Heather Wilkinson. Simon never went to the lunch, but Don, Gail, Ian and Heather all attended.
And they were all invited at a church service.
Yes, we did hear that today. Erin went up to everyone at church and invited them to her house for this lunch.
Simon initially said yes, that he was going to attend, but he later texted Erin a day before the lunch and said that he would not be going.
Yes, so we did hear that from Nanette Rogers SC. She is the Crown prosecutor. So she was the one today walking the jury through the prosecution case.
So Laura, all 4 guests arrived to Erin Patterson's house together.
Yes, that's right. And Ian and Heather actually had never been to her house before, so the lunch almost started with a little bit of a tour. Erin showed them around the house, and then soon after, lunch was served.
And I think we should make it clear that Erin and Simon's kids were not present at the lunch at all.
Yes, that is important to note.
So Erin served her guests individual beef Wellingtons on different coloured plates.
The prosecution described to us how when the lunch was being served, there were 4 grey plates, and then there was another plate. The prosecution says this was a tanned orange plate, and when it came time for everyone to sit at the table, it was the 4 lunch guests who had the grey plate, and Erin ate her serve of the beef Wellington off that tanned orange plate.
As well as the beef Wellington, they also had mashed potato and green beans on their plates. We heard from the prosecution that Ian and Heather ate their whole portion of their beef Wellington. We heard that Gail ate half and Don ate his portion and Gail's half.
Yes, and then after that, we also heard there was some cake and a fruit platter to finish off the lunch.
So Laura, for the first time, we heard why Erin invited the guests to her house for lunch.
Yes, so we heard that she wanted their advice. She mentioned there being a medical issue that had cropped up in her life, and she was wondering the best way to tell her children about it.
Erin then said that she had an ovarian cancer diagnosis, and the guest said it was best to be honest with the kids about it.
And I think it's important at this point to say that the prosecution say this claim was deliberately false. Erin does not have cancer. Her defence barrister, Colin Mandy, and we will talk more about what he had to say in his opening address today, but he made it clear in his address that Erin does not have cancer and that claim was false.
And then the prosecution said that Erin used this false claim to ensure and explain then why the children would not be present at that lunch on July 29.
All right, so I think we should take a step back now and let's talk about the mushrooms. It's not in dispute that Don, Gail and Heather all passed away after falling victim to death cap mushroom poisoning. That was made pretty clear today in court, wasn't it?
Yes, that's correct. So what we heard from the prosecution is that Erin told multiple doctors, nurses and also the Department of Health that she actually sourced the mushrooms from a local Woolworths in Leongatha And then she also sourced dried mushrooms from a Chinese grocer, and that was in either Oakley, Glenwaverley, Mount Waverley, or Clayton. But she couldn't remember where exactly she got those dried mushrooms from.
And for our listeners who don't know, those final 4 suburbs are located in Melbourne southeast.
Erin was also asked by doctors whether she actually foraged the mushrooms, and she denied those allegations multiple times. I think it's also important to note that the prosecution says that the Department of Health received no other reports of people falling ill and no mushroom products were pulled or recalled. Okay, Laura, now let's move on to the dehydrator. Can you tell me what we learnt from the prosecution?
The prosecution walked us through what happened after the lunch, and one part of this was surrounding the dehydrator. A dehydrator is a kitchen appliance that you can use for various purposes, but mainly, like its name suggests, it's to dehydrate food items. So the dehydrator that Erin had at her house, it was found by police days later at a local tip near her home. It was forensically examined and there were found to be traces of death cap mushrooms on this dehydrator. But I will just say at this point that the defence admits that Erin did get rid of this dehydrator. They're not trying to shy away from it. They admit she got rid of it at the tip. The defence told the jury today in their opening address that their client did tell a number of lies in the aftermath of the lunch. They say she panicked because she was overwhelmed by the fact that 3 guests, 3 people close to her, had died following a meal at her home. Another lie that the defence admits their client told was that she had never foraged for mushrooms before. She told police that she had never done it, but Mr. Mandy said today that she admits she did forage for mushrooms, but she denies that she ever deliberately sought out death cap mushrooms. Just to reiterate though, the defence says that the lunch was a terrible accident and that Miss Patterson did not deliberately poison that meal with death cap mushrooms.
Okay, Laura, so moving on to the next topic. The prosecution says that Erin said her 2 kids ate leftovers of the beef Wellington meal the next day for dinner. Is that right?
Yes. So according to the prosecution, Erin scraped off the mushrooms because the children didn't like them. And she told them as well that these were leftovers from that Saturday lunch. But again, it is important to note that the children did not fall ill and they did not have any symptoms of death cap mushroom poisoning.
Now let's go back to our lunch guests, Don and Gail Patterson and Heather and Ian Wilkinson. They got really sick days after that lunch.
Yes, very sick indeed. We had a lot of detail in court today about their symptoms and what the final days of their lives were like.
So in the days following the lunch, all 4 guests moved around to different hospitals and they all ended up at the Austin Hospital and they were all critically unwell.
Don, Gail and Heather continued to deteriorate over those final days, and they got to a point where the doctors that were taking care of them were of the opinion that the illness was unsurvivable, that there was nothing they could do for them.
So sadly, Heather and Gail died on August 4 and then Don died a day later on August 5.
But Ian's condition did improve over the following days and he was eventually discharged following weeks of treatment in hospital. So the prosecution spoke a bit today about Erin's presentation at Leongatha Hospital 2 days after the lunch. By this stage, the lunch guests had been admitted and were quite unwell, and Erin arrived at the hospital and very quickly one of the doctors there realised that she was the 5th person at this lunch and that she was the person who hosted it. He explained that they were worried the guests had fallen ill with death cap mushroom poisoning and that she was at risk herself. But the prosecution told the jury that Erin told doctors that she had experienced symptoms. They included diarrhea, but she reiterated to them that she needed to leave and that she was not prepared to stay in hospital. But it is really important here to note that the defence said it was disputed that Erin feigned sickness after the lunch. They said that she wasn't pretending to be sick. Their case was that she was sick too, just not as sick.
Okay, so now a website was mentioned to the jury. It's called Naturalist. So the website is a platform about plants, animals and fungi, and in particular in this case you can log mushrooms that you find across Victoria. Can you tell me a little bit more how this relates to the case?
Yes, and I'll just say from the top that dates are really important here. So on April 18, the prosecution said there was a mushroom expert who found death caps under an oak tree in Loch, which is near Leongatha, and posted it on this website, iNaturalist. About 10 days later, the prosecution said Erin's phone data suggested she was in this same area. A month later, there was a second post on this website by another expert. This post was made on May 21. The expert said they had found death caps along a street in Outram, which is another area close to Leongatha.
And so did Erin travel to this area as well?
Well, the prosecution say the very next day on May 22, she travelled to this area as well as going back to Loch, the place where those first mushrooms were posted by the first expert.
So in summary, the prosecution are saying that Erin travelled to both of these locations after she saw these posts on the iNaturalist website.
Yes, and that is the prosecution case.
Now let's move on. The prosecution said today that Erin had 2 phones. Can you talk more about that?
Yes, the allegation is that she had 2 phones, and one phone was never recovered from police, and including with that, the SIM card was never recovered. The phone that police did recover, they believe it was factory reset on 3 separate occasions, including remotely after it was seized by police.
Gosh, that was a lot from the prosecution. Was there anything else that they said that we needed to know?
Yeah, one final thing to note was the prosecution did not offer a motive. But it is important to remember that the prosecution don't need to prove a motive in murder trials.
Okay, so we've talked about the prosecution. I reckon we should move on to the defence. They didn't have a lot to say, did they, Laura?
No, they didn't. And that is really standard. The opening address made by the defence in any trial is usually a lot shorter than the prosecution's. It's just a response. They don't have to start arguing over the allegations the prosecution made. They just need to summarise how they put their case. We mentioned him before, Erin's defence barrister Colin Mandy. He said today that it was important that the jury remembered that Erin was innocent until proven guilty.
So we haven't really been able to speak about everything that happened in court today. There was a lot of information, but we will touch upon different points later on.
Yes, this trial is going for 6 weeks. So the day of the openings is always a very big day for jurors as well. There's a lot that they are taking in for the first time. But both parties will walk the jurors through all of this evidence across the trial. So rest assured there will be plenty of detail to come.
Thanks, Laura. So make sure you stay tuned for all our coverage by heading to themushroomcook.com.au.